What's going on, you guys? TBR here, back yet again with another King of Fighters All-Star video, and happy Monday to all of you out there. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. In today's video, we are going to be revisiting the Tower of Trials and continuing our series of videos on this game mode from Friday. Now, if you guys did not see Friday's video where we took a look at Tier 80 against Boss Syndrome Original Zero and how to get through that fight, then you guys want to check that out. Link will be in the description. However, in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at Boss Syndrome Igniz on Tier 85, and I'm going to be showing you guys my run in order to clear this fight, as well as the team and the build that I used in order to do so. Largely, if you guys saw my video on Friday against BS Original Zero for Tier 80, then you will know what team we're going to be using. However, I have modified a few things and perfected a few things, so that will be something we'll talk about in today's video. But before we go ahead and get into all of that more, make sure if you guys haven't already done so, you smash that like button and subscribe. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the footage. Cue that intro. Alright, you guys, so in today's video, kind of like what we had done on Friday where we took a look at Tier 80 against Boss Syndrome Original Zero in Tower of Trials, we are also going to be taking a look at Boss Syndrome Igniz's battle on Tier 85 of Tower of Trials. Now, I know that this is a fight that has been very difficult for a lot of players out there, and I'm going to attempt to go ahead and give you guys all the details on how I was able to clear it. However, if you guys have not seen Friday's video on BS Original Zero's boss battle on Tier 80, I would suggest that you go take a look at that video, in particular the breakdown and the explanation as to why we're using this team, because largely we are going to be using the exact same team with one main exception here that we'll talk about. However, I'm not going to be going back into all of the nitty-gritty details on why we're using this specific lineup in today's video. However, I will kind of give you guys a brief summary as we go here, because largely the approach to this battle is going to be pretty similar to what we did against Boss Syndrome Original Zero. So I will be talking a bit about it in today's video, but if you want the full explanation, links in the description to that Tier 80 clear video as well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the team, and then we'll get into the fight after we talk about the build. So this is going to be the team we're going to use here, largely the exact same team that we talked about on Friday against Tier 80, as I mentioned. Now, of course, the reason why we're going to be using these three, there's going to be two main reasons. The first one's going to be the immunity core. So we talked at length about this on Friday, but basically, to summarize, we become immune to damage for 4 seconds when our HP is 30% or less on a cooldown of 10 seconds. Now, this is a core that each one of these three characters possesses, and basically what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be exploiting this core. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be going into these different fights, and we're going to be trying to basically juggle these immunities. So basically by that, what I mean is we're going to be trying to tag in and out to whoever has a fresh immunity core active, and we're trying to avoid a lot of that damage on the core finisher against BS Igniz. Now, the core finisher on BS Igniz that he's going to be spamming is not going to be full screen. So we had talked about this and touched on this with BS Original Zero, with his core finisher as well not being full screen. But basically what that means is you can technically avoid the damage if you are far enough behind or in front of Igniz. So that is something that, depending on how well you can time it, you can avoid that damage that way. Otherwise, you can go ahead and do what I did, which is basically eat all of those core finishers and just juggle your immunity cores, and you'll be in really good shape that way. Either way, it comes down to what's comfortable for you. I just found this to be the most comfortable for me because I really didn't need to worry about taking the extra steps that were necessary in order to try and dodge correctly and get that timing window down and all that. I didn't find that necessary for this fight, but it is something that's optional, that if you need it, you can go ahead and use it as well. Just understand that it will require you to learn how to dodge and get that timing down just a little bit with that finisher, which can sometimes be a little bit hard to read. So with that being said, the immunity core is the utmost importance. It's what we're going to be using to basically exploit these bosses. So that is the first big reason we're using this team. The next big reason is because we're using explosion on all three of these characters. So all three of these characters do possess explosion on their kits. So the reason why this is very important is basically going to be because when it comes to these characters these characters are going to be dealing set amounts of damage on those explosion cores. So basically with those explosions, you're going to be able to go in here and you're going to be able to deal a ton of damage with the explosion on all three of these characters without having to worry about some of these penalties. So that's going to be pretty much where you're going to be deriving most of your damage from. So that is the second major reason why we're using these three. And so in general, I highly recommend these three in particular because of that core, because of the explosion, and in general, these three characters are going to treat you very, very well in these fights as long as you can juggle your immunities and know when you have them on cooldown and off cooldown. And basically you can kind of just play around with it from there. Eventually the muscle memory will be as such to where you won't really have much problem remembering who has what, and you'll get through this fight fairly easily. In my opinion, this is a much easier fight than BS Original Zero was, at least in my experience. I was able to clear this after one day of getting to it, so I think I needed like 4 attempts at it or something and got it on the 4th. So in general, really not that difficult, at least in my opinion, but there are some things you'll want to know. Now, I had mentioned that I did make one modification to this team, and I'm sure you guys see exactly who that is. So I am using Gintoki here as a striker for a healing striker on this team now. So before I was only using the 2 healing strikers here, Chun-Li and Athena. Now I have added Gintoki to the mix. If you guys don't have this Gintoki, don't worry about it. You can use somebody else. But the reason why I'm using him is you guys will see here the striker core where he recovers the active team member's max HP by 1.8% every 1 second for 7 seconds and decreases damage by 12%. This is of the utmost importance, and the reason why, and the only reason I was noticing I was having any issues against this boss in general is because I needed a 3rd healing striker. So as I was going through and looking at my healing strikers, this one stuck out to me, and the reason why is because I really like these heal over time effects, kind of like what Athena has. Athena's, in my opinion, is probably the best in the game. And the reason why I really like these types is because basically what I can do is I can use them in a more flexible way than I can with things such as Chun-Li, where she's just going to heal outright the amount of heals that she has on her kit, and that's it. So like with this one here, she's basically going to give you that heal right there immediately of 12%. I like the heal over time. The reason why I do is because I can basically swap out after I've already popped off that striker and continue to heal in the background and not have to worry about my character losing out on some damage there. So in general, I really like this type of healing striker, and that's why I added it here. Being that Ryu and Akuma are my primary damage dealers on this team, that's the reason why they get the good toys, and Chun-Li is playing with her little sister here. So in general, you guys can move these around however you see fit, depending on how you have your characters built, but in general, that's what I like, and you guys are going to see this come up clutch in this footage, like big time. So if you guys got him, use him. Otherwise, there are other healing strikers in the game. I just prefer this one because of those reasons, and that's why I'm using him there. So that's the only change to the team, besides moving the strikers around a little bit. So let's talk about the actual builds, right? So the builds should not come as any surprise to anybody who saw my video on Friday. You would know that I am going to be using the 1000 blow set. So the reason why I'm using this primarily is going to be for that immunity core here. So this immunity here is a little bit different than the cores on the characters. So if you take a look here, you become immune to damage for 3 seconds when your Street Fighter V character's HP is 10% or less on a cooldown of 35 seconds. This is just a little bit of an insurance policy. I have this on every single one of these characters. So if we were to take a look here, you guys would see that I am using this on everybody. Conversely, being that these are all native EX characters, if you have the new set from the current EX Volume 2 banner, you could also use that because it also has an immunity core. But in general, I have these at the ready, so that's why I'm using these. And then when it comes to my option cards, you guys are going to see that I like to have a 1.9 second cooldown reduction option, and then I have these exclusive options for each character on them. These are just to buff up the explosion a little bit. In general, they aren't absolutely necessary, but if you were to take them off, I would try to go with maybe a 1.9 second cooldown option, kind of like this guy here, or any of your other options that are going to apply that, because you definitely want to try and fire off as many skills as possible. So largely the approach to the fight, and we'll get into the footage, but basically the approach to the fight is pretty simple. I guess I can show you guys the stones again real quick, even though they're the same, but there's those. I'll talk about this here while we go through these, but basically The approach to this fight is very simple. Again, he's going to have primarily two different ways of applying damage to you. One is going to be his core finisher, and again, Igniz's core finisher can be dodged, so keep that in mind. If you would find that easier, you can do that. Otherwise, you can do what I do in this video, and that's pretty much just juggle through them. But another way that he's going to apply a lot of damage is going to be his dot. If you end up getting that dot applied, that is another reason to swap out to a character that has immunity on the ready, or just has enough HP to jump back into the fight. You're going to want to try to exploit your hyper armor skills as much as possible to try to avoid any further damage from there. Your awakening rotation you want to use as much as you can. Finisher wise in this fight, it's actually okay to use either your 3PG or your core finisher depending on the moment. The core finisher I like a lot in order to get that super armor off the boss, as well as to put him back in the air. This is very important. Basically, the way that I try to time this, and you guys will see it in the footage, is I try to time my finisher, specifically my core finisher, for whenever the boss has been on the ground and he's trying to stand back up. Because typically speaking, when he goes to stand back up, one, he might have that super armor, which is going to mean that you can't really do much to stop him. And two, he's probably going to fire off his core finisher, which is probably the easiest way to read that against him that I've been able to find in this fight. But basically, when he's trying to get back up on his feet, you guys are going to notice I'm going to fire off a core finisher if available in order to knock him back up in the air. That's going to buy me some extra time for my immunity cores to come off cooldown if necessary, but it's just also going to go ahead and knock him back in the air so I can get a little bit more damage on him as well. The big thing that you're going to notice in this fight is you are going to be in a race against the clock in just a small way, because honestly, this fight can take a while. You guys are going to notice that it actually takes me quite a bit of time to take this fight down, but basically the biggest thing is just to make sure that you guys are getting as much damage on board as you can and taking every opportunity you can with your awakening spam. You know, instances where you would use the 3PG finisher over the core finisher are really going to be dependent upon the fight itself for you. You know, you will know and you'll kind of be able to feel when it's going to be a good time or when it's going to be necessary. Largely, I only used mine whenever I knew I needed to get a few extra seconds off the clock in order to buy time for my immunity cores. So that's really when I would use it. Otherwise, I prefer the core finishers in this fight, but you can use either or just depending on what situation you're in. The most important thing in these fights is always going to be your immunity cores being off cooldown. So you're pretty much just going to have to try and pay attention to that. As long as you're good enough at paying attention to that, you're timing your strikers correctly for your heals, and you're being quick on your thumbs, you guys shouldn't have very many issues with this fight. Like I said, I found this to be a lot simpler and a lot easier than BS Original Zero even, and so that should give you guys at least some hope on this fight. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into the footage. I think that pretty much covers everything about the team. So now that you guys know why we're using this team, how we're using this team, and what we're going to be looking at approaching this fight, let's go ahead and get into the footage. All right, you guys, so now that we have gone over the team itself, let's take a look at the actual run. Now, this is a pretty long run. I don't think I'm going to go through the entire thing. I don't think that's really necessary. I will go ahead and leave the raw footage of this fight on this video so that way you guys can check it out for yourselves. But with that being said, I figure we'll go through the first several bits of this, just so that way I can kind of reiterate some of the talking points we went over in the explanation of the team. So we'll go ahead and just jump into it. So this is going to be the clear that I made. I just went ahead and uploaded this for you guys. Now, the big thing to keep in mind is the initiation of the fight itself here. If you take that poison damage, just bow out. That's going to be a golden rule for this entire fight, you guys. Whenever he applies that poison dot, get out of there. Now, right there, you saw I kind of telegraphed that he was going to use his finisher. I went up into the corner. I knew it was coming. That is something you're eventually going to get used to, right? Now, he did apply not only poison, but petrify here. That petrify is absolutely devastating. However, this is where the healing striker comes in clutch. So again, you guys are seeing that basically every time he applies that poison at the beginning here, and it gets easier as the fight goes whenever you get your finishers up and you get enough of your actual PG going and so on, to where this won't be as much of kind of a game of chicken, so to speak, especially once your awakening rotations are up. So in general, keep that in mind. So right here, Now that we are going to be below 50% health, we're going to be able to start juggling our immunity cores, but we also have our healing strikers ready. So right here, you guys are going to see, I'm just going to town on him. I know he's going to be using his core finisher coming up, and he's got that armor, so I am just going to pop off that core finisher that knocks him back in the air, gives me some time to bow out and get a fresh character in. You're also going to notice that my Ryu's health is back over 50% again because of the healing striker, so good stuff. All right, there, Chun-Li was in a little bit of trouble, so now we got Akuma in. He is going to have his awakening rotation ready and a core finisher at the ready as well. So right here, now that we know that we are going to need to use the core finisher before he uses his, we're just going to pop it off. He's going to be up in the air again, so we can get a few more skills in, tag into a character who's fresh, and rinse and repeat. So this is kind of the game that you play. Chun-Li in general, like we had talked about the other day, for the fact that she does have that shield, unlike these other guys, on top of that immunity core, she is extremely strong for this. But basically, if you run into an awkward situation where your characters are all on cooldown before you can tag them in, and your character that's currently on the field doesn't have any skills ready or an awakening rotation ready, you can go ahead and just play turtle with it, just jump into a corner away from Igniz and just wait for those cooldowns to come up. This is not a race. This is something that's going to take you some time. So in general, it's best to be safe than sorry. But again, guys, we are basically doing exactly what I've told you. We're juggling our healing strikers, we're using our core finishers, we're swapping in and out whenever necessary, we're keeping fresh characters on the field, we're using core finishers whenever we can, and basically, you guys, this is a very simple fight. Again, I did not go through and do this in the MLG Pro way, where I'm basically just dodging every finisher and so on, because I really didn't need to. I found that it kind of overcomplicated the fight, and really it was unnecessary. Now, right here, you guys are going to notice, again, I got petrified. And again, you guys, that is going to be a really, really difficult situation to be in sometimes. However, what I noticed about Igniz is he's not going to be doing a lot of attacks whenever you get petrified. A lot of the time, he'll just kind of let you out of it. He'll just kind of walk around or stand around and watch you as you're just standing there as a statue. So in general, it's a really, really devastating situation to be in. However, the best that I can tell you is you basically just want to try and swap out as fast as possible whenever that happens. And if you can, pop off your healing striker before you do, especially the ones that are going to heal over time in the background. But basically, you're just going to have to play around it the same way you would play around the dot and so on. So right here, took a massive amount of damage, but that's okay because we have our healing striker and we also have our core finisher. So he's got that dot applied. We're going to swap out. That way we can heal in the background. You guys are going to be able to see that off to the side, that our Ryu will gain a little bit of HP over time. Not a whole lot, but just a little bit. In general, that Gintoki doesn't heal as much as that Athena, but at the same time, it's enough for it to make somewhat of a difference. So basically, you'll notice also that my characters for most of this fight stay at close to 50% HP or above for most of the fight. Now, of course, that isn't going to be the case the entire battle. However, you're going to notice by virtue of the fact, and again, right here, I ran out of characters I can swap to, and I'm trying to get Ryu healed up a little bit, so I'm being a little careful. However, he's still dropped down farther than I would like him to be, but that's okay because we got a little bit of time that we can buy here with these finishers, and we also have Chun-Li at the ready, so we'll be in good shape. We just need to be careful and get this Akuma out of here, get that awakening rotation going on Chun-Li, and that way she can take up some of the slack here. However, there again, she got petrified. So again, very, very scary situation to be in when that happens. She almost died, but we swapped out again. We have our healing striker again. We're going to try and get Akuma in here as soon as we can. First, we're going to get a core finisher off just to buy a little bit more time. And again, guys, you see kind of the process here. It's a very simple fight, but you have to be very quick. You have to be very smart. You have to be very cognizant of what character has what at any given time. You guys are going to notice that I'm basically keeping track of my healing strikers, my immunity, my core finisher, all this stuff, this entire fight. However, in doing so, what that's allowing me to accomplish is exactly what you guys are seeing here, which is keeping these characters out of that like really dangerous zone where everything's starting to turn red and you're basically going to be worried sick. Yeah, so right here, this is actually a scary situation, right? I knew I had my shield. I knew I was in kind of a finicky situation, but in this situation, I will put Chun-Li in more dangerous areas of the fight than the other two a lot of the time. And the reason for that is she has a little bit of extra sustain with that shield, but also she is going to be the one that is going to be the least important on damage. So if anybody's going to be in a dangerous situation, I would prefer for it to be her than the other two guys, especially from the fact and the standpoint that they do the most damage, but also they are going to have that healing striker with that heal over time that's a little bit more beneficial. So in general, I would prefer to have them. If somebody's going to go down, I'd feel more comfortable finishing a fight with those two than I would with Chun-Li and either of the others. But again, right here, guys, we're getting that heal going. We've got that poison dot on us, but we have our hyper armor on our effects because we have that awakening rotation. We can just keep using it over and over, so we don't have to worry about it too much. If you get the poison dot with your awakening, it's really not as big of a deal because you can basically keep using your hyper armor skill to keep that damage off of you. But in general, you guys are going to have seen that there. And then I swapped out to Chun-Li here. She has her awakening rotation. We're going to get her out of there. We're going to get Ryu in. He's got the healing striker, so we're in good shape. We'll go right back to Akuma because we know he has his healing striker. He's at a good point with his health. He was close to a finisher. And so in general, again, guys, it just comes down to keeping track, right? So as long as you're keeping track of who's got what, whose cooldowns are where, what you've got going on with every character on your team, you should be in pretty good shape, right? I think it's pretty self-explanatory at this point without going through this entire fight, just what I'm doing here. You know, you will get into sticky situations here and there. It just comes down to basically being able to make a split-second decision and knowing when you have to swap in and out and who you can swap in and out to. So in general, I would say that if you are using the healing striker technique, you can kind of get by a little bit more with whoever has that Athena striker. Now right here, this was a bit dangerous. I was petrified, and again, that petrify, guys, devastating, right? You guys are going to see this, but my Akuma luckily was able to tank through it. Right there in the moment, I thought that this run was ruined because if I lose my Akuma, I'm losing most of my damage. However, luckily I was able to get through there, and again, you will have noticed that Igniz, while he was attacking me, isn't necessarily going to be as aggressive as, you know, a normal player would be if it were not an AI or something like that, obviously. So this is somewhere where I'm going to use the 3PG finisher. Now, I used the 3PG finisher here because I saw the opportunity to, and I wanted to make sure that I had my cooldowns at the ready on everybody as much as possible, because that Akuma situation did kind of cause me to have to panic just a bit. Now, I want to get Akuma in for the heal. However, he got petrified, but luckily I was able to get him out quick. He's going to heal in the background. Pay attention to his HP bar over there. You guys are going to see that. So again, guys, you're just juggling. You're basically just knowing what your skills do. You're knowing what your skills have as far as the cooldowns are concerned. You're knowing where you're at any given point. And honestly, this really isn't that difficult of a fight. I'm able to get through this thing, as you guys are seeing here. Not easily. This isn't an easy fight by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time, it's definitely not as difficult as you might think. Now right there, I basically wasted an awakening rotation, but I wanted to save my Akuma. I wanted to make sure he didn't go down because he was starting to get low because petrifies. Again, petrify will stop you in your tracks. Your only priority when petrify happens to a character is to swap them out. Hopefully, if they do get petrified, you have a healing striker that you can pop off just to kind of offset a little bit of the damage he might be putting onto you whenever you're in that position. But try to swap out as fast as humanly possible. If you have those heal over time strikers, you're still going to get your heals in the background, so you should be okay. But in general, again, guys, pretty simple, straightforward fight for the most part. Now right here, this is where we're starting to get pretty close. Right there, he got really lucky and dodged out of my core finisher. So tit for tat there a little bit because we've dodged a few of his too, but in general, this is where the fight pretty much crescendos and we get through this thing. There really isn't much more to say. I don't think anything of note really happens here. Really, you guys are going to notice we're just doing the exact same thing we've done the entire time. So I don't really feel like there's much more explanation needed about this fight, because honestly, anything else would just overcomplicate it. So in general, you guys, I hope that this series of videos has been helpful towards you guys. I know that a lot of people have commented on the previous one saying that it was, so I'm glad and thankful that I was able to help you guys out with that fight. In general, this one, like I said, the approach is largely the same, with a few little idiosyncrasies that are going to be different to differentiate it from the previous one. But in general, I hope you guys found this informative. Let me know in the comments section if you have any additional questions. But good luck in your Tower of Trials fights, you guys. And until the next one, you all take care. Peace. This guy's such a chump. Just petrify me. Go for it. Just get my Akuma in there and finish this off. Easy. Easy. Easy money. Boom. Good luck, you guys.
Continue.